Hey Heat Seekers, in this video we're going to be talking about the top 10 quarterbacks for Dynasty Fantasy Football.
Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Before we get started, make sure you slap that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of our free fantasy football content. Alright, so let's get to it. At number 1 overall, shouldn't be any surprise to you, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback, Kansas City Chiefs. We saw a huge breakout 2018 campaign, 50 touchdowns, all sorts of accolades. No Super Bowl ring, but it only took another year for him to get to that. What we did see in 2019 was some regression, but still a top quarterback option. Now, obviously, he did miss a couple weeks with injury, but the dude was still averaging roughly 23 fantasy points per week, depending on your scoring. Just to add to that, they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round this year. So now he has a very competent running back, taking nothing away from the previous running backs. You add somebody that's dynamic like CEH to that backfield to catch some passes, to keep those defenses honest with the run game, to just take some of the slack off Mahomes. You put that together with bringing back Watkins and having those weapons they've already got, you've got a very successful number 1 quarterback in fantasy football. Number 2, again, not another surprise. The guy was number 1 overall in scoring last year, Lamar Jackson, quarterback, Baltimore Ravens. His 2018 rookie campaign had its ups and downs. We definitely saw promise from this ascending young talent, but what we saw in 2019 was a breakout. Becoming the number 1 quarterback in fantasy is no small feat. As defenses get better adjusting to his game and his style, things might get a little tougher, but he grew in his ability to pass the ball, having 36 touchdowns and being able to move the ball through the air just as well as he moved it on the ground. Now, obviously, we expect him to continue to develop and continue to work on his accuracy and growing with some of those receivers that they've been drafting. We've seen them draft a few receivers in the last few years, and Hollywood Brown and Miles Boykin and some of these guys. So the sky's the limit, and this guy is a continuing growing talent and will be great for your fantasy roster for years to come. That being said, number 3 is a guy who's been great for your fantasy roster for a long time already. Russel Wilson, quarterback, Seattle Seahawks. Now, you'd start to think with as long as he's been in the league that he'd be much older, but he's only 31 years old. He's been successful since he entered the league in 2012. You should expect nothing short of 3,500 to 4,000 yards through the air, 30-ish passing touchdowns plus some, and plus he's got a little bit of wiggle in the running game. He's always getting out of trouble with his legs if need be, so he'll add a few hundred yards rushing, get a few touchdowns here and there. Not predominantly a running quarterback, but he can do it just fine. So he is easily still a top option for your fantasy roster. Number 4, a guy that broke onto the scene last year, Kyler Murray, quarterback, Arizona Cardinals. No one really expected him to jump into the top 10 so quickly because of how rough the Arizona offense and the team as a whole was last year, but they really showed promise. Kyler Murray leads that team. He isn't just the quarterback of the team, he is the leader. That's an amazing thing, to see him grow so quickly, and he finished the season as one of the top quarterbacks in fantasy. He has no problem running the ball. We saw almost 550 yards rushing, and was he had like 4 touchdowns last year. They've added some talent, so obviously he has a true number 1 elite wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins to go with all of the other things that they had already. They've got a nice amount of receivers now to fire up that high-powered offense. They're going to be throwing the ball a ton, and they're going to be moving the ball very quickly and doing a lot of things. Obviously on the ground, they've got Kenny Drake and Chase Edmonds, and they have a lot with their running backs involved in that offense as well. But Kyler Murray's the centerpiece of that. We expect him to easily be in the top 4 to 7 range of fantasy quarterbacks for a long time to come. That being said, if you are enjoying what you're seeing and you're getting something from it, don't forget to slap that subscribe button. We want to keep you up to date with all of our free fantasy content. Number 5, Deshaun Watson, Houston Texans. You got to think, if you're Deshaun Watson, does my coach hate me? I mean, he gets rid of his best receiver. He signs a guy that was healthy all of 2019 in Randall Cobb, but certainly not any younger. He is a smart receiver and is going to be able to do a lot of things to help them. But man, those top three options are scary injury risks on a year-to-year basis. If you're Deshaun Watson, you're going to be having to make a lot of things happen, and you may get stuck playing with a lot of receivers that are still growing and developing. You know, the Isaiah Coulters of the world and the guys they've drafted this year. But Deshaun Watson's such an elite talent at quarterback that he can win no matter what's going on around him. You know, the offensive line has been shaky. They've tried to do some things to address that, but that doesn't mean that all is going to be well for him. So he's going to have to make some things happen on the ground, through the air, and he can do it all. Deshaun Watson is a great, great quarterback, and he will be for some time to come. This is where it started to. This is kind of where we had our clear tier break as a writers group. We saw kind of a top five that everybody really did kind of agree on, that these guys are the top quarterbacks in fantasy. But then kind of 6 through 10, there were some discrepancies. You know, guys saw other guys higher than others. So 6 through 10 is going to be a little bit more interesting. It may be a little bit more challenging for you to necessarily agree with our writers. So make sure you post in the comment your top quarterbacks. Let us know who you think is the top fantasy quarterbacks. That being said, number 6, Dak Prescott, quarterback, Dallas Cowboys. I know everybody loves to make fun of Dallas and kind of poke fun at him, but Dak Prescott has been a very good fantasy quarterback since he got into the league. He was number 2 last year, and with players coming onto the team like CeeDee Lamb, and with the offense should be staying very somewhat intact as it has been. You know, obviously we've lost guys like Travis Frederick, and their offensive line's getting a little bit older, but Dak should still have no problem producing somewhere around 4,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, and probably another 200-300 yards, and probably 2 to 3 touchdowns on the ground. You know, that gives you a recipe for a QB1 and a very good QB1, and he's still young enough that he'll be a good QB1 for years to come. Number 7, somebody a little bit on the lower end of that spectrum. Matt Ryan, quarterback, Atlanta Falcons. Now, obviously, age seems to be no difference to him. I think he's 35 years old this year, and he's been a QB1 most of his football career, and we don't expect that to change. You know, their offensive line is still pretty solid. They've done some things to help him in the running game. You know, Devonta Freeman kind of had been up and down in the last year. They brought over Gurley, and as long as Gurley's healthy, that's an upgrade. They still have a very dynamic wide receiver group: Russell Gage, Julio, Calvin Ridley. They've got some guys to work with. Matt Ryan got another tight end to fill in for Austin Hooper, who's very similar in skill set, and Hayden Hurst. So we can easily see him being very similar to the production he's had in recent years. You know, 4,500 yards, 25 touchdowns shouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for 2020 and really beyond, because at 35 he can still go for a few more years as long as he stays healthy. Number 8, Josh Allen, quarterback, Buffalo Bills. This is one coming into the league that people were kind of love-hate, but now that we've seen the maturation process of Josh Allen and his continued growth and development as a quarterback with his accuracy and ball placement, you know, everybody's getting more and more excited about him. Now, obviously, a playoff run last year where they looked good at times helped. You know, adding a guy like Stephon Diggs in the offseason is a huge help. You know, Diggs is very good at making quarterbacks look good because he's got a good catch radius. He can make tough catches. He can make your quarterbacks look good, and that's what Josh Allen needs. He needs a guy like that to go with John Brown and Dawson Knox, and you know they got Singletary out of the backfield. So we're excited about Josh Allen and the things to come. You know, he gives you some wiggle on the ground as well. He's going to give you rushing yards and a fairly good amount of them in most cases. That offense as a whole and that defense is good, and they're a continued playoff team. They're probably pushing for their division this year with the changes that have happened up there. So Josh Allen is a very successful guy and a guy that we really like going forward. Number 9, Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions. Stafford is one of those guys that the last few years haven't been good to him. You know, back injuries have caught him, and so this one's a little bit shaky, but hear us out. So before his season was cut short with injury, Stafford was averaging over 24 fantasy points per game. That would have got him number 2 in the league if he would have stayed healthy the rest of the season, only behind Lamar Jackson. That's huge. If he can stay healthy, that's a big if, but this is kind of our risky pick in our top 10. If he can stay healthy, he's still young enough that he can still be a nice QB1 for some time to come. That offensive line, they continue to make changes to try to improve it. They've added obviously some help in the running game and DeAndre Swift to help kind of take the pressure off of Stafford. Obviously Kenny Golladay, we've already talked about in our top 10 receivers video. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you do. Their offense and their team is continuing to grow and develop, and there's some really nice pieces there. So if Stafford stays healthy, he's easily a QB1. Last but not least, the number 1 overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, Joe Burrow, quarterback, Cincinnati Bengals. This is the one on the list that people will really be surprised about, but think about it. Kyler Murray came in last year, different type of receiver, obviously, but just as talented in different ways, and he jumped into the top 10 very quickly. Burrow, look at what Cincinnati's got. Now you Cincy fans know exactly what this team looks like. Kind of a developing, growing defense, but the offense has been really rough as of late. They've added Joe Burrow, they added T. Higgins. You get Williams, the left tackle, coming back from injury, who was out all last year. So that's like, almost three first-round pick value type players coming back to this offense. The offensive line is continuing to grow. They've added some pieces. They're younger. They're developing. If AJ Green comes back healthy, you've got Tyler Boyd. You've got some tight end help. Drew Sample, they took second round last year. This offense, Joe Mixon coming out of the backfield, Gio Bernard, if they're using him as well. I mean, this offense has a lot of pieces. You insert a quarterback with the profile of a guy like Joe Burrow, a leader, a big arm quarterback, and can do a lot of things. What appears to be a very intelligent quarterback. He's very patient. I mean, look at his college career. Had trouble at Ohio State, kind of bounced around, didn't really get things the way he expected. Bided his time, got to LSU, had kind of a rough previous season, and then turned it on last year and just set the building on fire. I mean, he just blew up the college football landscape. I think Cincy could be one of those teams that's very sneaky and becomes one of those teams that jumps up to really compete in their division. Now, they've got tough competition. Pittsburgh's good. Baltimore's good. Cleveland should be good with the type of team that they got and all that talent. It's going to be tough for them, but they've got a lot of pieces in place to be very successful. All that spells success and fantasy success for the leader of that offense, Joe Burrow. That's it. That's our top 10. We appreciate you guys watching. If you watched to this point, don't forget to tell us who your top quarterbacks are down in the comments. And don't forget to slap that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of the free fantasy content that the team over here at rotoheat.com is putting out there.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it. You want to. Do it.